By now you've probably heard that there's some changes coming to Utah's medical cannabis program. In this video I'm going to break down the 4 major changes that are happening and what's to come after. Probably the most controversial part of HB 3001, or the current law, is this idea of a central fill. When we decided to negotiate with all the opponents of Prop 2, there was a desire on the part of many in the legislature to have no dispensaries at all, instead to have this government distribution mechanism that eventually turned into the state central fill model. What's been interesting is that there's been actually a lot of confusion in the public about what the central fill is. I've seen many people and some organizations claiming that the central fill was kind of this, at the center of the program, and that the growers would sell their product, their flower, to the central fill, the government-run central fill, and that the central fill would then sell its product to the dispensaries. That's not at all true. It's a complete misrepresentation of what the current law says, and it's not what we would have signed off on the negotiation. What we ended up with after the negotiation was seven privately owned dispensaries, and then this 8th sort of dispensary off to the side, this central fill, that would buy its product from the private market, the growers, the processors, and then it would distribute it to the county health department. So it was always just kind of the side extra thing. Even then, we told everyone in the negotiations, this isn't going to work, it's going to fail. We had a lot of concerns, but we ultimately decided to give them the opportunity to try it out, to push back on the feds, see if there was something they could do. And they tried. The regulators have acted in good faith. I think some of the other legislators had that ambition of trying to see it work. Unfortunately for them, it didn't. And so now the pendulum is swinging back a bit in the direction of Prop 2 by eliminating the central fill entirely. So what you're going to see in this special session is that this 8th dispensary, if we can call it that, and then all of the county health departments are going to completely go away. It's being removed from the program. They've run into financial problems in terms of payment processing. They had this vision of that the state would be able to accept payment directly from people as the central fill owner, and that they could sort of mix that illegal marijuana money with all the state's money. But you know, others, the Attorney General's office, Treasurer's office, and many others have expressed concerns, and rightly so, because this is federally illegal. And so while that desire was there on the part of some of the folks involved, ultimately they couldn't really get it operational. Then there was also the cost as well in having the state operate this type of program, and that heavy cost, all that expense of operating a business like that, would then trickle down onto the patients. And so these are the concerns that we had up front. What we're seeing now, and what you'll see soon in the special session, is that the central fill is going away, the county health departments are going away, and that leads us to the next item. In the negotiations, we went from probably 2 or 3 dozen dispensaries, privately owned dispensaries, down to 7. Because there was this idea that there would be 29 or close to 29 pickup locations, theoretically, around the state. With that entirely being removed, the question now becomes, how do we increase patient access? What you're likely going to see in the initial draft coming out of the special session is going from 7 to 12. This is going beyond what we negotiated. In the current law, we said if central fill fails, we had baked into the law, put into the law, the current law, some fail-safes so that we would go from 7 to 10 privately owned dispensaries. Well, now we're going to go to 12. But what we're working on right now is building some consensus to go even beyond that to 15 or 20. What's important to understand also, though, is that the market is going to start very small and slow, and it's going to build over time in the years ahead. For our part, we're very confident that as the market grows, we're going to have more dispensaries, more medical cannabis pharmacies in the future. It's just going to take time to get there as the need develops. It's not that we need a ton of businesses around the state on day one necessarily. And so we're going to go to at least 12. I think there's a good chance that we're going to be able to persuade the legislature in the special session to go beyond that. And then the third option we're going to talk about is taking it even further for patient access. One of the claims or visions of the central fill model was that it would get a product better out to the rural patients. And so what we've done is that we're going to increase the number of private dispensaries. I think we'll go beyond even the 12, whether now or soon. But what we're also doing in the special session bill for the first time, we didn't even do this in Prop 2, was we're going to have home delivery. So either the dispensaries themselves or they can contract this out. They're going to be able to set up a mechanism where they can take it straight to your home. They would tell you, hey, we'll be by between 4 to 6 p.m. You, the patient or the caregiver or the parent for a minor, would have to be there, present. They can't leave it on the doorstep. They can't leave it with the neighbor. You would have to provide your ID and your medical cannabis card, and then they would be able to leave it for you. So this is going to greatly extend the ability of people who prefer that for convenience, even if they live close by, or they can do it if they live far away, and perhaps a dispensary is going to say, hey, we do deliveries out to your rural area every Friday afternoon, and then you can just have that scheduled that every Friday afternoon or every other Friday afternoon they'd be by to do your delivery. So this is going to greatly extend around the state. We didn't have this concept, as I said, in Prop 2, so this is a nice little bonus that's going to help even more, especially as we increase in dispensaries to ensure coverage around the state. Since passage of Proposition 2, we've been working very closely with Utah Patients Coalition, which was the entity that sponsored and conducted the entire campaign. Now it's converted into a political action committee to stay involved up at the legislature, to get involved in elections, to continue to represent patients. So we've been working closely with them on a number of patient protections, and here's why. No fewer than about 15 patients have, in our view, been unfairly criminalized even after passage of Prop 2 and HB 3001. Some of the cases are stronger than others, but we've been learning a lot from this process in terms of how prosecutors are interpreting the law, how judges are interpreting the law, and so those insights are then helping us in the special session bill strengthen the patient protections even more. So I'll give you an example to be specific. We have a few patients where they violated some aspect of the law. Let's say they came from another state, they didn't have their recommendation, but look, they have cancer, all they had was oil. They violated some minor aspect of the program. Well, some prosecutors have been great. They've been said, look, just don't do it again, we'll drop charges, or we'll offer you a plea in abeyance, and as long as you don't violate the law again in the next 6 months, it'll drop off your record. That's great. That's very understanding, and many prosecutors have been that way, including the one that we did a big press conference with a few months ago, Jason. Here in Utah County, the prosecutors were being very above board and things resolved well. However, there are a number of prosecutors who aren't acting that way. For example, what they'll say is, okay, look, you violated the marijuana law. It's a Class B misdemeanor. I'll give you a plea in abeyance so that you don't go to jail. And here are the terms of that plea in abeyance. In addition to, say, paying a fine, what you have to do is abstain from THC for the next 6 months, be drug tested every 2 weeks, and if you're clean for the next 6 weeks, then you won't go to jail. Well, that's horrific in our view, because the prosecutor is saying you're either going to jail because you violated some minor aspect of the law, or you're being denied your medicine. And so we have a number of cases like this where prosecutors are all they know is that drugs are bad, marijuana's bad, you need to be clean. But in this new context where we have medical cannabis and it's a legal medicine, they should not be stipulating in these agreements that you have to be free of THC. That's their medicine now. They're not saying, hey, you were speeding so you can't use opioids, or you carried your opioids, your medicine in a Ziploc bag rather than the container, which is actually a violation of law. Therefore, you can't use opioids anymore. They just don't do that. And so this is obviously a new context for them to get used to, a lot of them who have been used to, marijuana is bad. And so we think this language that we're working on in the special session is going to help guide them a little bit more to know that they can't do that when it comes to marijuana for a patient who has a recommendation or a medical cannabis card. So this is going to really level up the patient protections and make them much more actionable so that prosecutors and judges are a little bit more handcuffed when it comes to these medical cannabis patients. So those are the big changes coming in the special session. There's going to be a few other minor things thrown in there as well. For example, what we contemplated under the previous law was that you either grow as a cultivator, if you're one of the licensed growers, you're either indoor or you're outdoor, and it's one or the other. What many of them have wanted to do now that they've become licensed is have kind of a hybrid so that they can kind of have a little indoor grow in kind of a greenhouse when the plants are getting started, and then they can go plant them outdoors. And so we're going to make a little tweak there to say that there's an opportunity to do both a combined indoor and outdoor grow. Another thing we're going to do is give a license for academic institutions that want to obtain medical cannabis. I think there's one that already has obtained some, and it's actually a violation of law. And so this is going to give them, at least for state law, some cover to be able to access medical cannabis, use it for research. How they do that with the feds is up to them, but we at least want to give them kind of a state structure to do so. And then on top of all this, we've got over 40 pretty significant changes we're working on to the Utah Medical Cannabis Act that are going to make it even better, more patient-friendly, keep improving the program. But those are going to wait until the general session in January when the legislature convenes, because they're not as urgent. We're going to take care of this urgent stuff right now so that we can keep the program going, hit those timelines, have the dispensaries, the product available in March or April. And so we got to keep things moving. That's why we got to do a special session now to make those changes. Everything else we're going to hold off and do in a bigger bill in the legislative session to come. So lots of stuff is going to be changing. We're improving quite a bit. This is very positive news from the patient's perspective. And so we're very excited and very optimistic that this program is going to keep getting better. So as always, if you have ideas on how to improve, if you've got thoughts that we should consider, or the Utah Patients Coalition, reach out to either of our organizations, because we're very much involved in these discussions and want to make sure that we're conveying and representing some of the stuff that you're hearing, that you're experiencing. So please reach out. Hope you enjoy this. Share the video so that we can educate others about what's coming and what's going to be changing, and we'll talk to you then.